Rules Committee. Today, we're considering an important legislation that will take steps to ensure that the Chinese companies can no longer be the ultimate beneficiary of the luxury electric vehicle tax credits that the Democrats enacted last Congress. When the Democrats enacted the Inflation Reduction Act, they said that the bill would help secure domestic supply chains and decrease dependence on the Chinese Communist Party in critical industries, but they were wrong. Republicans knew at the time that this would not be the result of the IRA, but unfortunately, the Biden administration has been determined to cede as much market share to many of our taxpayer dollars to foreign adversaries with the implementation of these credits as possible. The administration has been more concerned about bowing to radical environmentalists than in actually helping develop the technologies right here in America. The legislation will close the Chinese billionaire loophole that currently allows those entities owned by billionaires from countries of concern to benefit from the EV subsidies, as long as their ties to these hostile governments are deemed unofficial. The administration has put out regulations on the EV credit that effectively exclude the top half of the supply chain from being subject to any limitation at all. This bill will also ensure none of the components going into the batteries are sourced from China. Finally, this bill will prevent companies from benefiting from this tax break if they merely partner with foreign entity of concern firms without actually developing any domestic intellectual property or knowledge transfer. Thank you again for taking up this important bill for consideration. Mr. Chairman, I urge all of my colleagues to vote yes and choose American taxpayers over Chinese billionaires. The choice is clear. I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair thanks the gentlelady. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And inasmuch as this very well could be my last appearance before the Rules Committee, I'm leaving Congress at the end of this term. I want to express my gratitude for two things: for your service and the fact that nobody ever successfully recruited me to serve on this committee. You do a lot of work, you spend a lot of time, and we do appreciate it, but I'm happy to only be here on this side of the table. When it comes to manufacturing, and a subject that is near and dear to my district, and particularly auto manufacturing, we have two choices. The choice to either let China continue to dominate manufacturing, including dominate the production of electric vehicles, or we can invest in American manufacturing to create jobs right here in the U.S. and ensure that American workers are building those vehicles here at home. The electric vehicle tax credit is helping to lower costs for consumers, and we make sure that we continue to make vehicles here in America with American workers. During the pandemic, we had an economic crisis, but now America has one of the strongest economies in the world. Over the last several years, 16 million new jobs have been created, and there's been record small business growth. Stock market is at all-time highs, wages are up, inflation is coming down. We know it's a problem, but it's coming down. But there's more work to do for sure, especially lowering costs for working families on everyday items like gas, groceries, and housing. But for the first time in a very long time, we're seeing a manufacturing boom in America. Under the last administration, we were seeing more jobs go overseas. Now, hundreds of thousands of new manufacturing jobs have already been created in the U.S., with more manufacturing projects being planned or currently under construction. And I can attest to this. We're seeing that in my district, huge projects, investments that are putting people to work in good-paying manufacturing jobs in the future, great-paying jobs that you can raise a family on at companies like SK Siltron in Bay County and Hemlock Semiconductor in Saginaw County, helping to propel the clean energy manufacturing economy. Over the last 2 years, since the Democratic Congress, President Biden and Vice President Harris acted, over $175 billion in private investment has been announced to build electric vehicles here in America, to build those cars here, including both vehicles and batteries. Republicans and Democrats in the past have worked together on a bipartisan basis to stand up to China and to protect U.S. manufacturing from China's unfair trade practices. And this, of course, included our historic work on the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act to ensure that products made in Xinjiang with forced labor didn't enter our markets or undermine American workers. It also includes our work to strengthen oversight of foreign investments from China, like Chinese joint ventures with U.S. companies and investments in sensitive industries by modernizing CFIUS, which I know is a subject that this committee will hear more about shortly. We can and should continue to work together on these meaningful bipartisan steps to protect our national security and our economy. Unfortunately, this legislation doesn't do that. And it's been fairly clear that this is an attempt to eliminate the tax credits, including the EV tax credit, that is actually helping to boost American manufacturing and lower costs for consumers. This bill would undermine our efforts to bring thousands of good manufacturing jobs to the U.S. It would raise taxes on hardworking families who are simply trying to purchase a vehicle. Much of what has been said about the EV tax credit, even in this hearing, is simply factually incorrect. I'd be happy to address any of those subjects. But this legislation is the wrong direction for American manufacturing, for American workers, and the wrong direction for our economy. And because of those reasons and many others, I urge my colleagues to oppose the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair thanks the gentleman. The gentleman yields back. Chair thanks the gentleman for his kind remarks. The chair will observe that I find myself more inclined toward the arguments of Ms. Miller, but in the interest of time, I'm going to yield to the ranking member.
I agree with everything Mr. Kildee said, I have the same concerns, but I have no questions.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Minnesota.
And since we're making it quick, I agree with everything Mrs. Miller said, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Let's see if we could get a whole, complete agreement. It's just not bipartisan. Thank you so much for explaining it so thoroughly, and yes, I'll be a no on this aspect of the rule.
Thank you.
And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized. No questions from the gentleman from Georgia.
Yeah.
Seeing no further members wishing to ask questions, I want to thank this panel for their testimony and staying with us for so long, and this panel is excused.
You trying to set a standard.